Conversations, once again, it's really getting to be an annual thing here. We're doing a program every annual time of the meeting of the General Assembly with you. We should do it more often, yeah?
Yes.
But it's very good to see you all. Welcome very, very much. And welcome to you in the audience, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program once again for the umpteenth time. Many times we've done programs going back maybe 20 years or so with representatives of the Neutrei Karta. It's a movement within Orthodox Judaism that is very unique and very interesting, and we have four members of that here. They're going to have some videotape they're going to share with us. I just briefly introduce them. They're all rabbis, so we're on the far right of myself. We have Rabbi Feldman, Rabbi Weberman, Rabbi Weiss, and Rabbi Beck. And gentlemen, all welcome really very, very much to Conversation. It's a great pleasure to see you again.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe Rabbi Weiss like to talk these things, and maybe you could share for the general audience, okay, and realize that we're talking to a lot of people who will not have heard of Neutrei Karta. Maybe you would share Neutrei Karta as a thought system and as a movement, and then from that perspective we could talk about things in a more contemporary moment and so forth. But could you share a little bit just background on Neutrei Karta?
Well, first I pray to God that He should bestow upon me His wisdom, that I should be able to convey His truth, and so be able to sanctify His name and take the terrible stain and desecration that is ongoing now since the state of Israel, the concept of Zionism. We should be able to help to erase that with God's help. It's a privilege and honor. Thank you very much for having us on the program. It's a privilege to be able to have the merit to do this, to help clarify to the world the distinct difference between Judaism, the religion that is followed by the Jewish generations throughout the world and throughout all the generations, this religion, and the new, relatively new concept of Zionism, which is only around 100 years old, created by non-religious Jews, Jews who actually, Theodor Herzl, his friends, who abhorred religion. What is the difference? Basically, they are antithetical, they are contradictory. Judaism is spirituality, to serve God, a people of the book, to emulate God. Just as God is compassionate, we should be compassionate, following all the rules and laws of the Torah, which we are bound by, which we accepted on Mount Sinai.
And have for 2,000 years or so.
And have for a few thousand years, which accepted on 2,000 years of exile. Now, which I'll explain what that is with God's help. Now, Zionism is a movement which is the diametric opposite. It is a materialistic movement. It is to basically transform the Jewish people from a religion, the Judaism and the Jewish people following this religion, from a religion into a nationalistic goal, to have a piece of land, materialistic, the goal, a political issue, to be a nation amongst nations, purely materialistic. It may allow the practice, being that they want to refer themselves as democracy, or so to say, to allow the practice of religion. But in its essence, it's godless. It's a purely materialistic concept, and it will step on anything to reach that goal, any humanity or anything that stands in its way to reach that goal, because it doesn't have the godly morals and obligations that we are bound by the religion.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
You've got how many people we got in the world now, Rabbi? About 6 billion people. Most all of those people are seen within what we call a nation state, in a political entity that represents those people, with the exception perhaps, I don't know about Kurds. They're having a battle over that question now. But for many years the Jews were not possessed of a state of their own. Many of the people in the Jewish community suffered the Holocaust, and other anti-Semitism was delivered down. Why should it be that of all the people in the world, only the Jews, and maybe some others, do not have a state of their own? Why is it wrong for them to have a state? If everyone else can have a state, why can't the Jews have a state?
That is a terrific question, and it really is the issue what we're talking about. Let us just let me just continue slightly regress a little bit here. Judaism, as I say, is spirituality to serve God, and that is what required. What realize a Jew to be a Jew is because he's bound. He's following the teachings of the Torah. And one of the teachings of the Torah is that, which is one of the essences of the Torah, is that God said He's giving us the land of Israel. When on Mount Sinai He told us that on condition, He stipulated that we will remain on a level of holiness that we can remain there. If not, then the land will reject us as it has done to the nations prior, because they weren't on the special high level of holiness. Now,
Torah truth.
Right now, around 2,000 years ago, we find them many times in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all the words of the prophets, and in the Old Testament actually we were warned by the prophets that there will be a destruction of the temple, and we will be sent out because we weren't on that high level. And that happened, as I say, with the destruction of the temple. When that happened, we were clearly commanded by God that we should not in any manner try to return en masse to the land of Israel. We are forbidden to try to recreate our own entity. We put under 3 oaths, basically: not to return en masse, not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we're residing, not to try to end exile in any manner. Now,
you were being punished for your sins.
Correct.
2,000 years ago,
very
egregious
clearly,
sins or something that you were expelled.
It's very hard. Basically, people would compare us maybe to other nations, but it's a very God wanted of the Jewish people, and that we accepted upon us, as it says in the Old Testament. You should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In other words, we accepted a high level of servitude to God. Every person has to serve God, but we accepted this high level of being like priests to God. And on that condition, we were given the land of Israel, the Holy Land, and we were told that if we will not remain on that high level, we will be rejected basically from the land as a nation. And there's Rabbi from the head of German Jewry, brings in his writing, Rabbi Samson Hirsch of blessed memory, says that God does everything perfect. So it's a blessing for the world, because we would be dispersed amongst the nations to teach them how to serve God in holiness. And so in other words, it serves a dual purpose, a punishment for us. And at the same time, we will be a light unto nations, that they should learn how a person has to emulate God and serve God. Now, let me just, I know it's a very...
No, I think the Jewish people have been a light unto God. Look at their contributions have been mighty among all the nations of the world.
Let me just finish this concept. Our waiting, what we do hope for, and our yearning of every Jewish person, is the day when God will make a metaphysical change in the world. All humanity will recognize one God, and we will all go and serve Him in harmony. In other words, our yearning, what we strive for is one thing, the glorification of God, and that won't come about by our taking up arms, trying to shoot ourselves out of a godly decreed exile. It will happen when God wants it in His time, and He's compassionate. He doesn't want anybody to suffer. When He feels the time is proper, He will end in a second, in the blink of an eye, this exile. And at that time, all humanity in harmony will go up and will return to the land of the Holy Land and serve God in peace. Zionism, until that time, we are forbidden to try to return en masse or take up arms against the nation. Zionism came on the flip side, contrary to this, and they said they're impatient with the suffering of Jewish people. Why does it have to be? We have to take matters into our own hands. We will take a land, and we will basically create a Judaism that we can be proud of amongst nations, a nationality.
And protect ourselves.
Right. Now what happens with that?
Anti-Semitism.
But now remember, this is basically, this is contradictory to the belief that God is compassionate, is protecting us.
And that He knows what He's doing.
And He knows what He's doing. And it happens, so it's not only, it's in essence, they really, it's a heresy, because they don't believe that God is protecting us, and they're
a blasphemy.
And it's blasphemy. And also it's a rebellion in the manner, because we were expressly commanded commanded, don't attempt to return. God foresaw that there will be people who will be impatient and say that we have to try to return it. God expressly warned us, don't return the mass. Now wait, this commandment of not returning.
Wait, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait any
now,
longer.
See, that issue of not waiting would
I'm
be
sick of waiting.
Even if the land would have been an uninhabited land, and it would have been given to us by the Palestinians or by anybody, if it would be a land that would be desolate, we would be forbidden to take our own state because it's just refuting God's command of exile. Being that it's compounded with the fact that we are oppressing and expelling a people and doing whatever's being done, all the tragedies to the Palestinian people, it just compounds this cardinal sin and was therefore opposed by all the rabbinical authorities universally at the time of its inception of Zionism, this concept of Zionism.
By all rabbis, everybody objected.
Except for a handful, of course, which they labeled an aberration.
They were radicals.
Right. Now, that is the word Zionism. Zionism means Zion is Jerusalem. That's why they gave the name Jerusalem, because really they wanted to make their state for the nation, their new concept of a nation of Israel. Anyways, we would be profitable, we would be productive. Let's say they wanted to go to Uganda, but they picked, Zionists decided to create their nationalism, their state in Palestine, because they wanted to use and actually abuse the narrative. The fact that God gave us the Torah, waved the Bible to legitimize their movement, and they counted on the ignorance of the masses of the world, that people think that God gave the Jews the land, therefore we can retake it now.
Right.
And they knew they'll count on the ignorance of the Jews and the ignorance of the masses of Jews who are not educated around the world, and they'll be able to also get the following of the Christian Zionists, which we were talking about with God's help, that they will back them also because they know in the Bible it says, and they'll be able to condemn anybody who stands in opposition to them as being anti-Semitic.
Because
so
they had a perfect narrative, a perfect narrative
right.
to build a political movement on.
As I say, universally, the Jewish community in Palestine, the rabbinical authorities all over were up in arms, and they, to the greatest degree, they stood up in opposition. They said this is rebellion against God, and God warned us that it will only bring to tragic
rebellion
results.
Against the Torah.
Against the Torah, God's teaching.
That's serious.
Right? That's serious.
That's serious.
And it would only bring to tragedies, as we see, on an endless river of suffering for not only the Palestinian, but for the Jewish people, endless river of blood because they're rebelling against God.
And is it able to be understood, the Torah true understanding of, let's say, end time or something, that the conditions under which that might occur would be one, no military use at all, in a world of universal justice, and at the behest and with the agreement of everybody concerned, totally peaceful, with no military assertion of a nationalistic war-making capability to assert those rights? Is that not what the Torah promises? And can it be read differently? An interpretation, if you read the Torah differently, it's possible we have a small army or we do something. You understand?
Right. But well, that is clear.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, it will be a miraculous happening by God. How exactly that will come about? We know one thing, that it says, all the nations will come up and serve God and recognize that there is one God, and as it says on the Isaiah wall across from the United Nations, they will beat the swords into plowshares, the one nation will not put, and the wolf will reign together with the sheep. So there will be a metaphysical change. What to do physically, to take up the issue in our own hands, that is clearly forbidden by God, as it's stated in the Torah.
You all agree on this? You all agree on this basic narrative he's talking? Rabbi Beck, this makes sense? He makes good truth, right?
By all means.
Yeah, by all means.
Well, and you asked the question, why the Zionists, you say, why shouldn't, just like other nations have their own country, why shouldn't the Jews?
Why shouldn't we?
Well, I think that with God's help, that answers it, because this is a religion, and it's a religion, a godly given religion, so we cannot dispute or go against the teachings of God. God told us that I am putting you in exile, and we must accept as a religious people, as followers of this religion of Judaism, that we accept the teaching, the commands of Judaism, which says that we are forbidden.
And it would be good for you.
And believe in God. And God is the greatest compassionate in the world. If God says that this is what is good, we accept it.
And you could then then you could be doing your works among the peoples of the world to create a world of justice, elemental justice for all.
Right.
There would be the conditions under which God had indicated.
Exactly.
You're able to come, maybe perhaps to the end time, if the time is right, and so forth. And you could be doing good works as they have been doing and contributing mightily to world culture and improvement. No?
Certainly, and not only that, but Zionists Theodor Herzl and these people, we say to them, why, if you want to do something which is clearly against the teaching of the Torah, why are you stealing our symbol, the Star of David, in the name of Judaism?
What do they say when they say, you're seeing, suppose you got a narrative, you got a narrative that you present as a basic for political action or something, and they say, you see the Torah that way? I read the Torah differently. This verb says that it's perfectly all right if we have an army and we're doing it, and they read it that way. How do they, when all of the Jews were against it on Torah true interpretation of what the Torah said, how do they explain when you present to them the Torah says this is forbidden, and how do they rationalize that, those that have signed on to the Zionist agenda from the Jewish community, if you understand?
Yeah, well, firstly, we have to understand, if you would look at with the writings of Theodor Herzl and all his cohorts.
He was an atheist.
These people clearly spoke, and I have these writings here that that he wrote. One of the papers here that he wrote that he didn't in his biweekly Temura at page 12, number 2, page 1213. I didn't circumcise my son's hands, and like he simply he spoke proudly about how the fact that he didn't want to uphold the Torah and that he wanted to change.
He was an atheist.
He was an atheist. Yeah, and not
right?
only, I believe he was an atheist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
and not only that, but one thing, whether he claimed at the end of the day whether he believed in anything, I don't know. But he definitely rebelled against the Torah and abhorred the religion. In fact, in the diaries of Herzl, he writes, a way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism, and I'm quoting, was to speak to the head priest of Vienna to get an appointment with the Pope to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. He continues
to what?
That the Jews should all convert to Catholicism.
Catholic?
To be Catholics, yeah.
Jews
he continues, it should be done on a Sunday in the middle of the day with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on the faith of our forefathers. The conversion would be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. In other words, he had a whole plan about how we would go. So I mean, is this somebody who's supposed to be the one, the savior of Jewish people?
Wait a minute, you're supposed to convert to Catholicism?
Yes,
I mean to Christianity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just people hear this. It's like it's weird, and people then maybe will start realizing that their whole pretense of being a representation of Judaism is utterly ridiculous, and it's false, and it's just impossible. And so when they come and they use the Torah, it's only a ploy to legitimize what they're doing. Now they may try to use the Torah, like I say, they use the Bible that God gave the Jews because they count.
The Christians use the Bible. They'll use anything.
They
get
count
a
on
narrative.
the ignorance of the masses. The fact is, is simply step back and see who these people are, and then you won't question how they use the Torah. But if you would like to really study it, then you will see universally all the rabbis, clearly in the teachings of the Torah say that it's just impossible to blend in Zionism. It's really antithetical. And it cannot be blended in. And it's really simply the rebellion, the root rebellion against the concept that God is protecting us and the express command of accepting exile. The way they try to fit it into the Torah is neither here nor there. I could tell you the different things they say, that being that the nations took the Jews and the exile is too a hard exile, that the nations were also under oath by God not to oppress the Jews too much in this exile. There's a command of God to the nations in reference to the other nations of how they should treat the Jewish people.
They haven't treated them very well in Germany.
So that's what the Zionists say, being that they didn't uphold their part of the oath.
So why do we have to uphold ours?
But that's ridiculous.
It's
a nice theory, except the Torah doesn't work that way. You can't throw away your obligations. That's like two wrongs doesn't make a right. Just because that guy's a thief, you can't be a murderer
or
whatever.
There was rejection of the thing with Herzl early in the 20s or something like that, but then after the Nazi Holocaust, and they saw what happened, there was a very strong sense of never again are we going to be passive in the face of Christian or general anti-Semitism, and they're going to put us in the oven. We're not going to do that. It's absurd. So then a great deal of support for the idea of establishing a place where the Jewish people could finally be safe from pogrom. What's wrong with that?
Okay, again, that's playing on the feelings, emotional feelings of people, that being that the Jewish people, we suffered, therefore we won't, God is not, God forbid, protecting us. So in essence, if you look at that, understand that, then you will see that it's deeply rooted in, again, blasphemy, because you're saying that, see, God didn't protect us, therefore we have to take matters in our own hands. The Torah doesn't change. The Torah is a alive, we believe, a blueprint that God gave for the world, and God is timeless, and God said to us that we are forbidden to leave exile. The concept of, because we found a terrible suffering of Jews that would allow us therefore not to obey the Torah and say that therefore we have to take matters in our own hands and God is not protecting us. Well, that is saying that the words of the Torah is not for eternity, and God's words isn't timeless and isn't for now for us.
Let me take another example. We had in this country, in the United States of America, we had chattel slavery. We had people that were of black skin and they were slaves. And we've had slaves throughout history. They had slaves in Athens, or they had slaves. And so the people were slaves, and they said, okay, we're slaves. And the people used the Christianity to justify the slavery. And then finally it got to be where Rosa Parks and Martin King and some other people said, we're no longer going to stand for this. The world's evolving. We're time for us to get our own rights to vote and these kind of things. And they asserted themselves rather than be passive in the face of ignorance directed against them. Now, is that wrong for the blacks to take that position, or the slaves that have been slaves? And is it different for them than it is for the Jews? Is there a special obligation for the Jews only?
Of course.
Everyone else can act in this kind of way of protecting their own interests.
This was a basic.
It's a little hard for a lot of people to understand why you shouldn't be able to protect your own interests.
It's a very, very simple difference. There it was a basic issue of racism because of one's color they're different. And here we're saying, being that we as the religion Judaism, God warned us. This is our religion. God warned us in the books of the prophets. Anybody can open that and the Old Testament, that if we will not be up this high level of holiness, we will be sent out of the land, and things will happen. And things will happen. We will suffer, God forbid, and we have patience. And God knows these things will happen. And we have patience and believe that God will take us out. So the whole concept of Judaism is the belief and understanding that everything is from God. Now, it's nothing to do, if you say you want to reject this, then you're saying that I don't want to accept Judaism. You don't want to accept Judaism. Unfortunate, that's unfortunate, but don't use our name Judaism and wave the Bible.
But Martin King was a Christian, and he said no longer, we shouldn't just accept this, we should stand up, we should march,
now
we should assert our rights. That kind of,
but that was, again,
why is it all right for everyone to do that, except for the Jews?
Because, again,
you have to suffer the ignorance of people delivered down upon you. People have a hard time understanding why they should accept that.
This is a problem of racism, a material problem, and that has to be solved. And if there's racism, it shouldn't be racism. There's no difference between color, but we accept that when God brings upon us a punishment, it is because we have not done what we've done. This is that we were expected to do what God wants of us. That in the teachings in the law books, the code of law, it says that clearly. If God forbid something happens, we have to turn to the Torah and understand and be introspective and see how we have to better ourselves and believe clearly that everything is from God. And the solution, it will not be to try to throw away the exile and return, because on the contrary, that will only bring more of a punishment. The way is to return to God, repent, and observe His Torah, and in so doing, God will then bring the solution to us. That is the only solution. That is what Judaism 101 is. And if not, then it's not. Then you don't want to accept Judaism. Now we clearly don't accept this any racial difference or something like that. Now that being said, the concept of the Holocaust is a whole issue in and of itself. That a lot of inciting of things that happened by the Holocaust had a lot to do with, which is uncovering a can of worms that the Zionists really thwarted the efforts of saving Jews, all the Hungarian Jews, and we have documentation how the Zionists really thwarted efforts of saving Jews because they had a concept of that the more the Jews die, the more blood that's spilled, and the conquering nations will divide the land, will give them land. They'll give it to the Jewish people because they'll have pity. They will give them
because they had their eye on Palestine.
Also, they didn't want religious Jews coming up there. And I have really statements that were mind-boggling statements, which I brought along, which is, let's say, from Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel. And this is in his books. We have it in 1938, and this was actually in the Jewish press, written in October 18th. And we have the original quote also. He says like this, I'm quoting him: Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. The other Jews, which they don't consider the educated, the other Jews will have to wait, will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. No. In other words, they didn't want religious Jews to come in. They said, we don't want, this is 1938, we don't want to save these Jews. We don't want them because they're just going to be a thorn in our sides because they're religious and they're going to oppose Zionism. So they had a win-win situation here. They don't want religious Jews. They, like he said, supposedly, how ironic, the saviors of Jews, the ones who are against the Arabs, who hate the Jews supposedly, and they're the savior of Jews. They don't want, they didn't want the religious Jews to come there. They said the millions of Jews, he realized millions of Jews are going to be slaughtered. They'll have to be the dust of history. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. And at the same time, they said the more blood that's spilled, it will be only good for them because they will receive more land. So they used the Holocaust. They benefited from Palestine. A political thing. Right. They received money in the 50s. They received billions of dollars that were able to build a state from restitution from America, from Germany. From Germany. They also worked. We have documents for that. They also worked and first incited the Germans and worked with them. Now we're not trying to in any way release or absolve the Germans, or the Nazis from what they did. God will punish them for what they did. But the Zionists are not to be absolved. Also, they worked. They wanted incite. They had real issues to be able to have the Jews sent up to Palestine. And that they should be able to build up their country. So they created situations where Jews should not be tolerated in their lands where they were living throughout the world, and then they thwarted efforts of saving them. It's a whole long story. But I think it would be nice to give some other rabbis here an opportunity.
Yeah, I know. But this all rings true, right? Or tell me, or anybody, what do you think? He's got it laid out pretty much there and everything like that.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting thing. God knows what He's doing.
Yes, 100%.
And that there is a patience for the right time, and you don't push what God is trying to do, and that's what you essentially do. It makes you people, in a certain sense, the greatest opponents of the Zionist enterprise. Perhaps there is more so than the people who are seen as their enemies and so forth. And it's kind of ironic in a way, but you represent the Jewish tradition in the fullness of its historical experience, I think, in a certain sense, and yet a lot of people turn their back on that because of the political expediency of the interests of the State of Israel.
But you must understand that there's still hundreds of thousands of Jews worldwide. They have the whole community of the Palestinian Jews who, right at its inception, stood up and opposed it. And again, here I have a paper that I brought, a letter from the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. A document that's
the Torah, right?
A document from this was sent in November 18th, 1947 by the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Lushinsky, and it's on our site, www.nkusa.org, where you can find that he sent a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and again, it's only one paragraph, very small. The Jewish Orthodox community, the Eid HaCharedus of Jerusalem, comprising at that time 60,000 souls, objects to the plea of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state and or its residents becoming automatic citizens of the Jewish state. I must preface this that there was a delegation of the United Nations that went up prior to the creation of the State of Israel, and they asked the different communities if they want such a state. Obviously, the Muslims and the Christians didn't need it, but the Jewish community was when they met with this delegation. They said we do not want a Jewish state, but they were ignored because the powers were in Europe, Chaim Weizmann and these people. But when they found out that it's imminent to be created, so the chief rabbi of Dushinsky sent this letter to the United Nations in 1947. He fired off this letter and he said, I'm the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, which comprised 60,000. We object that you should at least leave me my city, Jerusalem. We object of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state or its residents becoming citizens of the Jewish state. Our community demands that Jerusalem be an international zone under your protection with full autonomy and its residents be free citizens of the international zone of Jerusalem. We beg of you not to take any action before receiving our memorandum. Chief Rabbi J.D. Zashinsky, and name Ashkenazi, you can't really see on this because there's a regular, there's a religious leader, so you understand that the Jewish community, which comprises hundreds of thousands worldwide. If you would just cross the Williamsburg Bridge from Manhattan
there
here,
are plenty. Yeah,
you'll
thank
see
God.
the most concentrated religious Jewish community, totally the most religious. There's not one Israeli flag. They're all in opposition to the state of Israel.
Is that right? Yeah.
But the reason why you find some religious Jews who do go along with supporting that, not returning land to Zionists, because you have the fear factor, which they claim they're not Zionists. Lubavitch's teachers were always anti-Zionist, but they say that the Zionists had such a powerful PR and propaganda that they constantly bombard the Jews, that the Arabs want to kill every Jew. So they say you have no choice now. So Jews unfortunately feel that they stand for
the fear.
The fear not to return land, because they bought into the propaganda of Zionists. And we say, our rabbis, who are still large communities around the world, say there is no excuse. First of all, it's false, the propaganda, and we are forbidden to have a state, and this is what's causing the suffering and bloodshed. And the real solution is the peaceful and speedy dismantlement of the state. Of course, you'll find an extreme group who will who join Zionism from this marginal, from the religious community, who unfortunately were conned into believing that this is part of Judaism. But that's already a marginal, extreme group of religious. I mean, the marginal religious. The really religious never accepted this concept of Zionism.
Neutrei Karta state of mind. I think it means defenders of the city.
Correct. Neutrei, it's Aramaic.
In Aramaic. Okay, one of the problems is such an interesting thing. We haven't had a chance to hear from Rabbi Beck on that, and we also have some footage we have, because you gentlemen, among all the people, I had the opportunity and have met with, in a cordial way, with the President of Iran, Mr. Ahmadinejad.
Right.
And that's really interesting for you people to have met with him when everyone was trying to meet with him, and they're now gearing up, the political forces here in the United States, neocon, to bomb that country, and there's a tremendous thing like they did with Iraq and so forth. And so we want to get some of that footage in too as well. So we have to get all this done. We got to make sure we don't keep talking. Although it's very interesting, we could talk for 20 hours easy. No problem at all. We could talk 20 hours about these things. But you understand what I'm saying? We got to marshal our time a little bit here.
Well,
Rabbi Beck, you agree with everything that he said, and I think Rabbi Beck speaks in Yiddish.
He'll say, we want to put that in
Yiddish.
I'll translate, yes.
Menschen fragen, wo suchst du zu dem Problem? Wo suchst du zu jenem Problem? Gib mir ein schreckliches Problem. Entweder mir, ein Muschel, zwei Menschen haben sich geschlagen. Es gibt ein Mensch, geht rein mit jenem in Stiebel, zum Beispiel jenem Skyler. Kriegt sich mit dem, kriegt sich mit jenem. Hat so ein Problem. Fragt mir, kommt und schreit, wo suchst du zu dem Problem? Wo suchst du zu jenem Problem? Ich habe von der einen Perspektive das einzige Problem.
People look at this world, they see this problem, that problem. It's scary. How do you get around all these problems? As he says, Rabbi Beck says, I'll give you a metaphor to this. He says somebody breaks into somebody else's house and he starts breaking this and he breaks that and destroys this and that. And people start saying, what are you doing about this problem? What are you doing about this problem? So he says, I'll answer you. There's only one problem. You're the problem.
Wir haben nicht mit Politik gar nicht. Wir suchen nicht, was wir trachten. Wir suchen nur, was steht in der Teure. Und von der Teure haben alle Jeden Messias Nefesh.
Okay.
Judaism is not involved in politics. It's not political.
Wir haben nicht mit Politik.
We don't have with politics.
Wir suchen nur, was steht in der Teure.
We're only saying what it says in the Torah. Trying to say what it says in the Torah.
Und von dem haben Jeden Messias Nefesh.
And for that, the Jewish people are ready to give their lives for that.
Wir haben nicht keine Sachen. Wir haben nur, was wir haben mit Kibbel. Der Zionism ist gänzlich beätzend der Hepper von Jüdischkeit.
We don't have anything new. It's not like a new ideology. What we have, it's only what we have.
It's rather old.
It's what we've accepted throughout the generations and been taught. And Zionism is the diametric opposite of all of this.
Of Judaism.
Of all this concept what we said.
Okay, listen. Okay.
En Meile is de alle Probleme wat Zionism brengt erop is de Hepper von dem Hiss von Klal Yisroel. Der Klal Yisrael hat einen anderen Gang. In der Klal Yisrael ist mit der Minne, man nimmt und alle Geschehnisse mit der Minne. Zionism ist eine ganz andere Sache. Er führt mit anderen Machschus. Haben sie die alle Probleme.
Zionism is, being that it's just the opposite, therefore, but they have another outlook on everything. In other words, Judaism, Judaism is a...
Wir haben Messias Nefesh bei der alten Jüdischkeit. Zionism ist eine neue Sache. Und man hat Probleme. Die Jüdischkeit ist der Heppach bei Eizem. Wir haben nicht die Probleme, was Zionism hat.
We don't have these problems that Zionism creates, that Zionism does, because Judaism is a totally other concept, other thing. Zionism creates its problems and has problems because of its creation, because of what they believe and everything, the whole outlook of life and what they do. So it's totally nothing to do, it's strange from Judaism.
It's a different realm. Ein Schild haben wir auf alle Schal, was mir schreckt und sie kann nicht mit allen Problemen, es sind nicht meine Probleme, die haben gemacht die Probleme.
So therefore our answer always when they come with this is that problem and the Arabs the problem, whatever the problem is, always say, we don't have these problems. You are the creator, you create these problems.
These are your problems.
These are your creating problems because of your whole ideology, your concept.
I can understand
And the truth is, historically, Jewish people lived contrary to the Zionist recreation of history, we were living together before there were any human rights groups of the UN, we were living in all the Arab countries and Muslim countries for hundreds of years. Relatively, sometimes better, sometimes not 100% perfect. We were always living together as in Palestine.
You're not 100% perfect?
No, I'm saying that wasn't always a perfect peace because we're different type of people, but we basically served one God and we were able to coexist hundreds of years in all the different lands because it's not a religious concept. Conflict.
Ich will noch ein kleines Beispiel. Ein Fisch schwimmt im Wasser und ein Feigl fliegt in die Luft. Und der Feigl hat verschiedene Probleme. Kommt der Feigl zu schreien zu den Fisch, ich habe so viele Probleme. Entschuldige, ich bin ein Fisch.
Yeah, he says just one other parable. He says a bird is flying in the air and he goes to the fish. To fish the water, and he says, "I have so many problems." The bird says, "You know, that you should." And the fish says, "Excuse me, I'm living in the water. I don't know your I don't have with your problems."
Right. Well, listen, it's so interesting.
Wir halten sich bei Alten. In der Sache kann ich schon kankieren. Als ich kenne, da Sache kann ich sagen, wir bleiben in der alten Sache, was wir wart auf die
Yeah. We said we're remaining true to the old, the Torah and everything, and this new ideology of Zionism, which is the state of Israel, this cannot have a existence, a long-term existence. And as in the Torah it says, if you go against God, it will not be successful. And we are only waiting for one thing: the revelation of God's glory, and that is what we yearn for, we look out for, and that we are waiting for patiently. And we have nothing with this concept of Zionism or going together with Zionism and their goal.
And also, that's supposed to be done with the Moshiach, and where's the Moshiach?
Which we believe that God will bring.
The Mashiach, I don't see.
Well, God will bring that is Jewish belief that God will bring that. We just have to pray and do what we have to do right.
Now, one of the problems is in the secular world or in any world, you have a problem with time, right? We're running short on time, and we got some clips. And I know Mr. Rabbi Weberman has things to say, and Feldman, if I may, Rabbi, you have some film, right?
Yes.
And you had a meeting with Mr. Ahmadinejad and so you have some film of that. Maybe you could set it up. We got to get it in because we only have an hour. We need 20 hours. We could have an hour. So could you tell us a little bit what the film is, and we'll show that. I think we ought to do that.
Well, first of all, it's going to be the first pieces about the most recent meeting we had with the Iranian president here in New York.
That was just recently, a couple of weeks
ago. Just a couple of weeks ago, where we met with him, and it was very interesting. It was like a meeting for approximately 45 minutes.
Very good.
And a very nice meeting.
Very busy man he was.
Yes, he was.
He was carefully scheduled.
And it was an honor for us. And he took it also very serious to meet with representatives of the Jewish community. And we were really happy to see, not for the first time, already for the third time, his respect to Jewish people, to Jewish rabbis.
3 times.
Yes, this was the third time.
Representatives in Neutrei Karta you all have, and so you've got a good you got a good relationship with him.
That's right.
And much of the world is directing their animus at him.
That's right.
And his country,
and we are familiar with his views. he does respect Judaism. He respects Jewish people. He has a Jewish community of approximately 25,000 people in Iran.
Really?
And we really felt that we need to understand that. And the senior Rabbi Beck presented him with a nice present, which you're going to see on the film.
Okay, good. We're at that. Let's set that up, please, in the booth. Let's run that piece of tape now. We're talking with representatives in Neutrei Karta, and here's the film. And pipe the film in.
و از این فرصتی که فراهم شده ما در نظر گرفتیم که یک هدیه کوچک هرچند که کوچک هست ولی سمبولی از نشانگر دوستی ماست که خواستیم خدمت جناب آقای رئیس جمهور.
If you hand me outside, we need to go till 32 minutes and 51 seconds. Stop it at 32.
We would like to read the inscription on this. September 2407, to His Excellency Dr. MAHMOUD AHMADIENJAD, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. May this gift be a token of gratitude for the sweetness and love you have extended to Jews and all mankind. On behalf of World Torah Jewry, presented by Neutrei Karta International, New York, USA.
24 سپتامبر سال 2007 خدمت جناب آقای دکتر محمود احمدی نژاد ریاست محترم جمهوری اسلامی ایران به عنوان سمبل تشکر و قدردانی از دوستی و لطفی که شما نسبت به جامعه یهودیت جهانی و بشریت دارید و به عنوان یهودیان تورات که در نیویورک هستیم خدمتتون رو تقدیم می‌کنم. افتخار بود که شما فرمودید.
With God's help, I pray to God to bestow upon me His wisdom and His pure thoughts, that I should be able to convey in few words the essence of our message for the esteemed President.
از خدا خیلی سپاسگزارم که این فرصت رو به بنده داد که باعث سلامتی من شد که در اینجا حضور داشته باشم و یک چند کلمه رو به عنوان پیام یهودیان این جامعه خودمون خدمت جناب آقای رئیس جمهور تقدیم کنم.
It is, of course, a great opportunity to meet people who are God-fearing and to discuss at length all the different problems and what is necessary to help people throughout the world. But, of course, the time is so short that that's not possible, and we, of course, take this into consideration, and we are extremely humbled and thankful for the President. Even though he is here for such a short time, and he is such an important figure on the world scene, and he has so much, obviously, to do for mankind, and still in all, he gave of his precious time to meet with us. So we won't have the audacity to spend time, any extra time, just a short, just a little message we would just like to say to the President.
البته این فرصت بسیار بزرگی است که برای ما یک فردی که خدا دوست هستش و خواهان این هستش که مشکلات همه مردم جهان در همه جامعه جهانی رو بتونه بهش بپردازه. ما هم خیلی علاقه‌مند بودیم که راجع به همه این مسائل با جناب عالی صحبت کنیم، ولی میدونیم که امکانش نیستش، چون با توجه به اینکه خیلی وقت شما کمه و با تشکر از اینکه شما با این وجود مشغله‌های بسیار زیادی که دارید و برنامه‌های مهمی که دارید نسبت به برنامه‌های بشردوستانه هم
that's really interesting. That was a very interesting meeting between you and the president, because there's so much bad press that he gets in this country, and they are ginning up, and it's a very beautiful exercise in negotiating with him, and helping to set the record straight, because a lot of propaganda is directed at he and his country, right?
I think it is important to stress what came out of these meetings that we've had, which Rabbi Feldman mentioned. We had a meeting once for an hour and a half.
That was last year.
When we were in Iran last year.
Oh, well, you were in Iran.
And before, when he was here the year before, each time it was on such intense pressure because of the shortness of time that he had here.
Right.
Or even the day before elections, when we were there for his two very big elections. And still in all, he gave us a tremendous amount of his time.
Isn't that interesting?
And let me just mention three
That's
little
very,
points.
very good
and
for the world that you got that meeting.
And on his site, which is the Presidency of the Islamic Republic of Iran, on his website, he wrote, and just I'm going to bring out three little points that the world should really be speaking about. He said like this: President MAHMOUD AHMADIENJAD here Thursday said that the world problems. The chief executive, which is the president, called for the need to solve the problems facing the world, including the Palestinian issue, through dialogue and the necessity for peace, and paying attention to the Prophet's instructions. He said, just as the Zionist, leaving out words here because of the time, just as the Zionist regime was established by big powers, it should either leave or hold a referendum, a free referendum, to establish a government based on the will of the Palestinian nation. Here I'm quoting word for word. Based on the will of the Palestinian nation, which all Palestinians, including Jews, Christians, and Muslims, will be given the chance. So in other words, he said, including Jews, they should make a government that's based on the will of the people, which he said. And let me finish with one more other thing. He said, while this regime, this fake regime, has set up a large prison in the occupied territories of Palestine for the Muslims, Jews, and Christians. In other words, he considers the Jews that are all there are under like a large prison for the Muslims, Jews, and Christians. They lay claim on human rights and freedom. He said, Ahmadinejad said, the vigilant and just human beings will not blame the Jews for the crimes committed by the fake Zionist regime and its supporters in the occupied territories, including genocide of defenseless and oppressed women and children. What he's saying here is, he said like this, that supposedly the world claims, Zionists claim that he's a hero for all the anti-Semites and that the Jews are the enemies of the world. He says you should not blame the Jews. And to whoever's listening to him, he's saying, don't blame the Jews for the crimes committed by the Zionist regime, even if they do genocide, God forbid, in the defenseless and oppressed women and children. Don't blame the Jews because they're being occupied by the Zionist regime. So in other words, he's telling the world, I'm not holding the Jews responsible. The solution is through Zion, and he said the solution is through peace and through to make a referendum and things. In other words, he keeps on. He did say, and which is he said that God will not allow the continuation of the same. In fact, it was Jonathan Steele from the London Guardian, and quoted in the University of Michigan, Juan Cole, a professor. They said that he's always being mistranslated. He didn't say that he should wipe off. He wants to wipe off the state of Israel. No. He said God wasn't like allow evil, just like we say that God doesn't allow evil. It will end, like Rabbi Beck just mentioned. But we pray that it should be speedy and peaceful. So they just to vilify and to claim that he wants that he's anti-Semitic. You just maybe, or God forbid, cause an anti-Semitism. We don't want that. So we go to him to bring out a point that we want to be friendly, as a Jewish requirement is, and that we could coexist
as with all nations.
And Zionists should, God forbid, not cause God forbid this catastrophe, as they've been doing all along in their unabated existence of causing death and suffering. They could, God forbid, cause a world calamity. Catastrophe.
You're right.
This is not the solution.
Your work is a very much more diplomatic one than I would suggest Mr. Bollinger's questions when they went to Columbia University. And again, one of the problems, gentlemen, is we want to get another piece of tape in, right? And Mr. Feldman, take it away, Mr. Feldman. We have another piece of tape. We got to get that in. Right?
Yeah, that's a little tape from the same day. Was after that meeting, there was a big pro-Zionist rally at the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza across the street of the United Nations, opposing the Iranian president, which was done in the name of Jewish people and was embarrassing for anti-Zionist Jewish community in the United States and internationally. And we had a nice crowd out there to counter-demonstrate them, to express the view of Torah true Jews, of Judaism,
Yeah,
of authentic
Torah,
Judaism,
yeah.
that we are against the state of Israel, against what they're doing, against Zionism, and we are not out there to antagonize other people and to fight other nations.
Okay, it's my duty to try and get all this in. There's so much we could talk about. So let's set up that other piece of tape and make sure we get that into this program. We're talking with Neutrei Karta in here. Black. We're on black. We got to get back to. Okay, there we go. Yeah, what's back?
Well,
and maybe okay. Well,
Yeah.
maybe Weberman hasn't said anything yet.
Yeah, just-
so what? You were there, or you want him to talk? Okay.
I just would
explain.
like to say this is the point is that Judaism. Not only is it logical, but that's the point is Judaism. If you accept the religion of Judaism, you have to follow the rules of Judaism. You can't make your own rules. The way of Judaism is that if God forbid you have God forbid a true enemy.
Yeah.
And I want to stress that is not the case by President Ahmadinejad. But even a true enemy, the Torah way is to be to approach with peace and try to appease and to
understand
and have build friendship and go through that. Zionism goes with their materialistic, anti-Jewish way of never again. We will show you. We'll be stronger than you. Power in your face, antagonistic and with haughtiness and everything that the Torah tells us is forbidden. Their approach brings to what they have close to 60 years. Even though they try the hawks and the doves and everything they try is 60 years of death and suffering. Our way is the only way because the Torah. And this brings peace. And on the contrary, like I say, Zionism creates enemies. President Ahmadinejad, and even in the paper, The Forward, weeks ago, a few months ago, reported that it's interesting that he gave charity to the Jewish communities, even though he speaks anti-Semitic, which they say he does, which is not true. But they see it's strange.
It is not true.
It's not true, as I mentioned, that
you were at that conference
and they twist his words. But
they twist words. People always do that, don't they?
And
here used to do that with things. Propaganda is used against us in order to.
And that's what they've been doing. And my words have been twisted. I mean, I could go through a litany of things that they.
Bet your words have been twisted. Right?
And so and he stresses that clearly he clearly stresses constantly that he really is not against the Jewish people. God forbid. On the contrary, he supports and he respects and protects the Jewish people. And as I say, the Forward even reported he gave charity. He gives charity for the Jewish people over there, for the Jewish communities. So this is our way is true Torah that we follow, and this will bring peace. And as we pray every day for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement.
What will bring peace? What is your attitude towards the state of Israel? What should happen? This is 2007, and what do you think should happen as far as what is it? Do you think the idea of Zionism, the establishment of the state, was illegitimate in a historical sense? What do you think should happen in terms of that part of the world and the Arab world and the relationship as we look ahead for the time ahead?
With God's help, this is clear. It's not what I think. It's
no,
the Torah. The Torah tells us that it is clearly illegitimate. It can only bring to, God forbid, suffering for the Jewish people besides for the Palestinians, which the time doesn't allow, which we really would have to express our feelings of support and pain for what the Palestinians have gone through because of the state of Israel. But the real solution, the only solution, is the dismantlement, the total dismantlement, not the two-state solution, but the total dismantlement of this so-called Jewish state, the state of Israel. This will bring, ultimately, people will realize
what will
that
happen to the people that are Jewish that live in Israel?
We are certain that the Arab neighbors, just as we've been living for hundreds of years as neighbors, they will allow the Jewish people to live there because they are being falsely portrayed as if they have a deep ingrained hate of the Jewish people. That is not true. We are clear that they will allow us to coexist as good neighbors, and if they wouldn't allow us, the Torah will command us that we would have to leave because we have to accept the ruling of governments if we have to leave. But we know that it's just propaganda of the Zionists that say that they won't allow us to coexist. They just simply want their rights of self-rule, which is their right according to God, that they should have self-rule over the whole land, the return of the rule to the indigenous people, the Palestinians, and then we could coexist, and we'll discover that it's just a mirage. But the Zionists are saying that they want to destroy us, and it's just in truth that it was a bad dream. This whole concept of the state of Israel and as a savior for Jews, how false that is. Rabbi Weberman is older than me, and so lived to 120. Will tell you of that.
120.
I said he lived to 120. Will be able to really bring out a few points of all. He had teachers, and his father's also an older one of our distinguished rabbis. He'll be able to mention something of that, the teachings of the rabbis in that aspect.
Yeah. We got a minute or so left.
Okay.
Get it in sound bites.
Okay. I just add that much that. I mentioned before that Judaism is a religion. It's not based on any nationality. It just happens to be so that part of the religion was, before the destruction of the temple, for a holy type of maintaining a certain sovereignty, but mainly it was holiness. And that's what we're hoping for again. But God will, it's totally up to God.
It's up to God.
Yeah,
And God,
it's a religion. In other words,
and God knows what he's doing.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah,
That's the
yes,
thing.
yes,
And he says, Moshiach.
Yeah.
There is no Mashiach.
That's
We're
right.
pushing things. It's too
right.
far.
Oh, you think
We
you're not
should be
allowed to
more
try
patient.
We
He
should.
may be
God
coming,
will-
and we should build a world of justice in order for there to be a condition where he can emerge, rather than trying to push it with Apache helicopters and so forth.
That's right.
Realpolitik. They have all the power.
Yes.
It's not the way it is. The
We're
idea
not a
should have
nation.
the
We're not a nation. We're a religion.
They're not a relation. Well, it's a lesson that I think probably it's a lesson of peace, really, in a sense, and live with people in harmony with all the people of the world. That's something the world needs, and that may be what the God of the universe decrees if we're going to not destroy our whole species, which we now have the capability of doing with terrible weapons that are beyond belief in their destruction. Right? So we live at a time, maybe the fulfilling of the ancient prophecies, if it is, it would be one that is being challenged now by the dangers that exist by propagandistic. You've had that directed against you, and I admitted that John has, and so forth. So we should try and understand the other person. That's the lesson of peace that's really relevant. I thank you, gentlemen, very much for doing this, for passing this message on.
I mean, again, we had Associated Press had to make a retraction. They said that we said the Holocaust was exaggerated. We forced them to bring about a retraction because we never said that. The Post, when we had this meeting with President Ahmadinejad, I said he wants us to get rid of Israel. I said, you're quoting me. How could you say that? And they still haven't made a retraction on that.
They don't do that. You see, well, they will create a myth, and then there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of power, and there's a lot of exertion of a certain, and they hold the idea very strongly to themselves. So that makes it very dangerous. It makes it a very dangerous part of the world, as you well know. And you bring a very interesting perspective, and I thank you enormously for coming in and sharing this with the public access community. And give my best regards to Mr. Ahmadinejad when you have a chance, and with God's help. And I thank you very much for coming in. And thank you for viewing. That's it for this particular program. We'll come back again tomorrow. Rabbi Beck, Rabbi Weiss, Rabbi Weberman, and Rabbi Feldman. Thank you. Best to your dad.
Thank you.
And thank you for viewing. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we got it. The trouble is, it's such a big thing. We could talk. You should have a program. You should have a regular television program that could be sending this stuff to the world. You should have a regular program every week. You could be talking.
We können es machen. Sie müssen es geben.
No, YouTube, you could put it on, but you don't need it. Like here, I've tried to.
The public access touch the regering met gefordert,
somebody in Manhattan could come here and produce a program.
Wir sind opgegeven, een geheilig van de maan.
Everything's free. No cost.
tzedukah.
That's a good price in any currency.
Jeder kann
You
melden.
could do a thing and then you could put it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
I've tried to get them to do it, but I don't know. You
No,
have to have
well,
somebody in
that-
Manhattan who would produce
Well,
it.
that's number one. Number two is we need to have a person that's really going to be able to do it like every